PCSX2 2.0 just released and offers a pretty compelling way to play your favorite PlayStation 2 games without having to keep up with original hardware. And while I am all about my discs and real consoles, and translucent colored PS2 shells are finally up for pre-order, I just ordered some, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least considering playing a handful of games just on the emulator alone. So that got me thinking, what kind of results do you really get when comparing PCSX2's ability to render games at a higher resolution and quality versus original hardware run through the top-of-the-line video scaler? Which option would be best for playing on my 4K OLED TV? The answer, it turns out, is not as clear-cut as I expected. Let's take a look at how a few games compare. All games will have their widescreen and no interlacing patches applied where relevant in PCSX2, and if no progressive scan or no interlacing patch is available, I'll be targeting motion adaptive deinterlacing to match the RetroTINK 4K. The original Just Cause is one of many games that has a widescreen patch in PCSX2, but other than that, you're not really gaining anything by playing on an emulator. The game is so simplistic in its visuals, it really wouldn't shine until the next generation with Just Cause 2 and 3 at least. That rendering it at higher resolutions only serves to showcase just how bad the game looks. Plus, it's the only game I tested where I still had very noticeable rendering errors, such as in these trees. Console wins here. Burnout is an interesting case. It definitely benefits from higher resolution rendering on PCSX2, strongly improving the visibility of opponents, cars you may crash into, turns, and so on. But you lose a certain magic that you'll notice come up with a lot of these comparisons. The lower resolution rendering combined with the aliasing jaggies and other noise on original hardware makes the world feel less barren. It prompts our imagination to see and feel detail where there isn't any and to fill in the gaps ourselves. So while I do think games like this play better in an emulator, it certainly looks a lot less impressive than it did on original hardware, especially running it on a CRT TV. Marvel Ultimate Alliance is a wonderful game. There's 3 of them now. They're ARPGs set in the pre-MCU Marvel universe, meaning you get access to basically every hero. It's a blast. However, the PS2 version is one of the worst ways to play. The graphics actually hold up surprisingly well here. I think it plays to the PS2's rendering style and targeted CRT output very well. But the frame rate is absolutely abysmal. It seems to be targeting a 30 FPS cap, but hovers around 26 FPS instead, resulting in uneven frame pacing and stutters like crazy. So the PCSX2 experience is basically night and day here, with widescreen, cleaner visuals, and the ability to target 60 FPS. But this is a game that also got a PC release and an Xbox 360 release too. It is hard to find now, but if you can find a copy of the original 2006 PC release, not the later Steam release that was a port of the Xbox 360 version, you can mod it up with over 50 new characters and a ton of added-in content, as the community has ported over all of the exclusive and missing content from every platform the game was released on. So if you're playing on a PC anyway for the emulator, you might as well go with the native PC version, in my opinion. Rule of Rose, I'd say, is a tie. Like with many 3D games, the widescreen and higher resolution rendering definitely benefits the visibility here, and generally does a good job of making it not look worse than it is supposed to, compared to what we saw on like Just Cause, for example. But I don't like how the noir effects render in the higher resolution version, and I think overall the ambience is just preserved better on original hardware. On a CRT or on a low brightness TV, in a dark room, with the door locked. Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers definitely gets a visibility boost in PCSX2 with an unlocked widescreen and higher resolution rendering. Even the movie clips look surprisingly solid this way. But you can't unlock the frame rate past 30 yet, and I think you lose a bit of the realism and immersion in PCSX2, but it's definitely a good game to play in the emulator if you're experimenting either way. Ratchet and Clank, size matters. This era of 3D game really shows what the PlayStation 2 is capable of, with widescreen and progressive scan 480p support on console. But there's absolutely zero question that the more accurate widescreen, higher res rendering, and especially the anti-aliasing you can use on PCSX2 provides just a far better experience. In my opinion, you lose nothing in Emulator here and have everything to gain. Except frame rate, that's still not unlocked to 60 yet. Soul Calibur II is a game that has continued to give PCSX2 trouble over the years. I don't know why. A lot of the issues, such as ghosting and stutter, have been fixed, but I still don't think it's a very playable experience yet. Rendering at native resolution really fights the deinterlacer into throwing lines into everything, and it just looks super ugly. Upping the render resolution to HD or higher hides some of the deinterlacing issues on the main characters, a trick that can be helpful in many games that can't be forced to progressive scan, but the backgrounds still don't get deinterlaced correctly and bounce all over the place. While the original console copy is one of the games that can still show the weak points of motion adaptive deinterlacing on the RetroTINK 4K, with combing artifacts sometimes sneaking in, it's just a much, much better experience all around on original hardware. Tomb Raider Anniversary is another 3D game that supports advanced output on the PS2 with 480p and widescreen, but you still just end up with a way better experience rendering at higher resolution on the emulator instead. Champions of Norrath. This and its sequel, Champions Return to Arms, are incredible games and a true shining example of what a console-focused Diablo Light can be. Set in the EverQuest universe, it shares the same engine as the Dungeons & Dragons Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games and features beautiful music. Someone please help me track down the CD soundtrack, please. Wonderful particles and water physics, and is just a lot of fun for hundreds of hours. It even supported big online play at the time, which unfortunately is not online anymore, though I'm hoping one of the mini PS2 online restoration projects will help bring it back. I think nostalgia is getting in the way for me on this one. Overall, it's a pretty easy argument that Champions is a better experience on PCSX2, if your hardware can handle it. You get 60 FPS, widescreen, a no interlacing patch, and rendering at 1080p or higher gives you better visibility into the world. It also shows that many of the models are much better looking than the PS2 gives it credit for. Like, this is nearly perfect. On the PS2, it's kind of muddy and shimmery. But some of the UI elements get that weird blocking effect where there's seams showing in the middle of them sometimes at higher resolutions, and the UI is just very low res overall. I feel obligated to do my playthroughs on original hardware with saves on my memory cards just because that's where I have always played them. But I can't argue with how great this looks in PCSX2, and the temptation to play here is strong. I kind of want to do an emulator playthrough to dump textures and make an HD texture pack for this game and see if I can make it look any better. All this being said, performance is not actually perfect here. This is a rare game that has pretty consistent frame hitches when traveling between areas, and while I don't think it ruins the experience, it is distracting. There's optimization threads on various forums going back years, but hopefully the experience gets smoothed in time and PCSX2 gets the best settings applied by default, as the new version now supports that. We really need to petition Snowblind Studios to remaster this game, or at least port it to modern systems and PC like they did with the Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance games, so we can get online co-op going again. There's still an active subreddit for this game, so go join and have fun. Tekken 5 is one of quite a few games I've seen that just kind of break the motion adaptive deinterlacer in PCSX2. Even just sitting in the menus with 480i with motion adaptive turn on, it bounces like crazy with lines in everything. This does not happen on original hardware in 480i with motion adaptive deinterlacing from the RetroTINK 4K. I don't know why it happens here. Thankfully though, the game supports 480p progressive and widescreen, so you don't actually have to deal with this for very long. I just like showing when it's clear that the emulator's deinterlacer still needs work. The game looks absolutely incredible on PS2 as is, one of the best looking fighters, but definitely improves with the higher resolution rendering in PCSX2. That being said, at 4K rendering, I did find myself kind of distracted by a weird screen tear in the middle of the screen, which seemed to go away when lowering the render resolution. But I'm not sure it's even visible here in the video, so it's probably not a real problem. Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 was one of my favorite Dragon Ball games of all time, but visually, it's kind of got everything working against it. On PS2, it's only 4x3 and only 480i, so the big outlined 3D models can be made to be incredibly crunchy, and it just doesn't look great. In PCSX2, you get widescreen and can render at a high resolution that makes the models and the art style look awesome. But this is another example of the deinterlacer causing some weird issues at any resolution. And I just wasn't happy with where I could take the game. I'll just keep playing on the original console. Metal Gear Solid 3 is one game that I 100% expected to repeat the shimmers and jaggies help fill in the detail and realism of the world with. But that's just not true. Kojima made an incredibly impressive looking game for the time, but rendered at high resolution with widescreen and PCSX2, and I'm not sure why we even need a remake. Look how great this looks. Really.
CQC.
Gauntlet Dark Legacy absolutely shines in PCSX2. 60 FPS, widescreen, cleanly deinterlaced, achievement support. It just looks incredible. This makes it feel a lot closer to the arcade original game than the crunchy mess on original PS2 hardware. Love this game. Katamari Damacy could go either way. The rendering is cleaner on PCSX2 with higher resolution and widescreen, but the art style is very simplistic, so it still holds up fine on PS2. God of War and God of War II are more ahead of their time games. 480p and widescreen support on console, these games were visually groundbreaking on top of playing great. I again think that the shimmer and jaggies of the original rendering help sell the quote-unquote impressive visuals on console, but I can't deny that just rendering them at a higher resolution makes for a much cleaner, better playing game here in PCSX2. This looks just like the HD collection they released on PS3. The emulator is a near perfect experience for these games. While the PS2 version still holds up, I did always find myself distracted by the pixelization of Kratos and other 3D models when I know that wasn't an intended look. Emulator wins. Devil May Cry 3 is another game where the motion adaptive deinterlacing in the PCSX2 emulator absolutely falls apart. But just using Bob deinterlacing paired with a higher resolution render, it looks perfect. Widescreen, 60 FPS, I have nothing to complain about the emulator experience once it's dialed in like this, and I never want to play this game on original hardware again. ATV Offroad Fury always holds a special place in my heart. I have always played it with my dad growing up, and the early 2000s rock music paired with fun jumping physics was super addictive, plus a silky smooth 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, the game is a muddy, blurry visual mess. PCSX2 does not really fix this. It starts to look better, rendering at higher resolutions, but something about the way the textures are filtered just feels very distracting to me, and the deinterlacing did not hold up. So I prefer playing on original hardware. Maybe if someone manages a progressive scan and widescreen patch for the game, I'll reconsider. Midnight Club 3 seems like it gets big upgrades in PCSX2. Widescreen, 60 FPS, and disabling motion blur are all possible with patches, but the way the game renders streetlights and other lights with light trails to blend them into the blur to create a specific style absolutely does not hold up to higher resolution and a lack of motion blur, at least to me. It was incredibly distracting and just broke the experience for me. Play on original hardware. Spyro Dawn of the Dragon runs at 60 FPS with 480p widescreen on original hardware, but only really benefits greatly from rendering at higher resolutions in PCSX2. Way better experience in my opinion. Play it in emulator. The Mortal Kombat games like Armageddon, which you're seeing here, are wonderful on PS2. They run great and support 480p widescreen. But as great as they hold up, again, they are just done much better by the emulator's higher resolution rendering. It's less of a true experience since you lose that PS2 charm, but in my opinion, emulator is a great way to go for these games. Jak 3 would not launch on my actual PS2 for some reason, but it's clearly yet another 3D game that just benefits from the looser rendering of the emulator anyway. And there you have it. 20 or so games played on a 4K OLED TV compared between original PlayStation 2 hardware with the RetroTINK 4K upscaler doing amazing work versus the impressive modern rendering capabilities of the PCSX2 emulator. Ultimately, the choice is up to you. Both are going to come with their upsides and downsides. I find myself leaving this project no less confused than I started. There are some games that I think I will move to playing on emulator, like Champions and Norrath, but there are some that I will absolutely keep playing on real hardware, like Midnight Club 3 and Calibur II. Now that you have this information, it's time to set up PCSX2 for yourself following this video, or learn more about the RetroTINK 4K in this video. Remember to be kind, rewind.